Hello and welcome back to Random Librarian here on YouTube. Today is a little bit of a quick update because it's October 4th. I'm leaving the country on October 7th, so I want to talk about the books that I've already read while I have them in hand and then send them off to other readers and go from there. So let's talk about the 3 books I've read so far in the month of October. Book 1 was The Herd, which is a murder mystery, thriller, people with secrets kind of story set at a co-working space that is exclusively for women. So I think that exists now. I don't know if it existed when this book came out or when the author was conceptualizing it, but it also felt really similar to somewhere that I worked, which was Her Campus, somewhere I interned when I was in college. And even like the way they described the offices is kind of like uber, like fashionable, chic, whatever, but also branded for the location. So that was kind of what happened here as well. They even had things like Workout Wednesdays, which we had, and like just the sense of it was really similar, even down to there were 3 founders who met at Harvard and like launched a company, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this feels so close to something that I've actually lived. So that made me really enjoy it. Not that I want anything to happen to any of the women in that area ever, because this does involve 2 deaths. So, you know, to get those off the bat. So I really enjoyed this. It was a very quick read. I had the audiobook going while I was sewing something, and then I had the audiobook and the book, and it was just a really fun read. So I highly recommend it. After that, I finally read this Bookstagram, BookTube, Book People favorite. This is my first Christina Lauren book. It's The Unhoneymooners. It's so off the wall, and the miscommunication in like the last bit is so like, you hope there aren't really people like Dale out there in the world, but he's very manipulative in this one. So if you haven't read it before, it takes place at a wedding. Olive's sister is getting married, her twin sister. Her sister wins a lot of things for free on the internet, so a lot of their catering and their dresses and their everything was like gifted for this wedding purposes. And as part of that, everyone but Olive and the groom's brother end up with really severe food poisoning. So Olive and the brother, Ethan, go on the honeymoon that her sister had won for her and her new husband, and then there's lots of shenanigans from there. Enemies to lovers, lots of miscommunication, so somehow didn't make me extremely angry, though. I feel like normally that trope is like the bane of my existence, and it wasn't too bad in this one, even though it was really bad in this one. I don't know, it's just a fun, light read, very quick again, and I'm glad I finally picked it up. Finally, I read book 3 of Binti, and this is 3 shorter novels, so it's a complete trilogy. It's set in space. Book 3 is the longest of all of them and has the most going on. There was a trip in the previous one, so this is what's happening while Binti is out in the desert, and her Meduse partner is back at their house, and they get attacked by the Kush, who are breaking the peace treaty in order to attack them. And we get a lot more insight into their traveling companion, who's also a master harmonizer. And there's just a lot that goes on here. We got a ship that comes back. So Third Fish, I believe, was the ship that Binti originally traveled on. And Third Fish had a baby, so we get to meet the new fish. And it's just so imaginative and handles Binti's PTSD again so well. So if you're looking for science fiction that is just like, and so inventive, I would highly recommend picking this up. Again, because they're much shorter, it is a very quick read. So I was happy to get this read in the first couple of days of October. And then I plan to read this tonight and tomorrow because I'm going into the city, so I'll take it on the train with me. And this is the 3rd book in the Inheritance Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I loved book 1 and book 2, and pretty much I'm just obsessed with anything N.K. Jemisin comes up with, so I am sure that I will love this one too. Just kidding. It is the following day, so the day before I leave, and I have managed to finish not just one, but 2 books, and I figured I'd just pop on and talk about it, even though this is going to be the most segmented video I've done in a good long while. So, if we're talking about the Inheritance Trilogy again, book 3, even better than the previous 2. This series is really interesting because I think in the Broken Earth Trilogy, which I read and enjoyed so much, the first book kind of had the biggest like twist that I didn't see coming, which I'm not gonna mention because if you haven't read it, I want you to experience it. And then the other following 2 books were like just as, well, not, for me they were like slightly less great, but still heads and shoulders above a lot of other books that I've read in the past year. But for this series, it felt like every book had its own story, but each book built on the other stories in a way that was like really just fascinating. So this was the culmination of all the previous books, and it was Sia's story, and I have loved Sia since book 1, and it's really interesting to see Sia, who's like the god of childhood, grow up and evolve and become something very different than his original intention. So, if you haven't read this series, I thoroughly recommend it. It was so smart and so interesting, and each book can kind of stand alone, but builds on the previous 2. Just N.K. Jemisin did it again, and I am so glad to be able to send this off to my cousin. Then yesterday, while I was in Boston, I ended up reading The Girl Who Could Move Shit with Her Mind on the train in, and finished it while, like, right before I got dinner with a friend. So as it says, Tegan Frost can move shit with her mind. She's on a bit of a government, not like hit squad, but like heist squad maybe, because they go and they're on like information retrieval as opposed to like murder. So they go into this building and they attach, like, she can undo locks with her mind. She's psychokinetic. I don't know what the difference is between psychokinetic, which is PK, and telekinetic, which is TK, but yes. So this kind of feels like an action movie, but with a main character with superpowers. And she thinks she's the only one, but then someone gets murdered in a way that only someone with like powers like hers could do. So then there's all of this infighting on her team because they're not really a found family, they're like a forced group. Because they all work for the same person, and she has something over all of them. So they all kind of need this job. And it was interesting, I'll give it that. Like, it was really entertaining. I think you can kind of tell that Tegan is a woman written by a man. Not in like the worst way where like, if you see those videos on BookTube where it's like, it's just absolutely not how women work. The only phrase that's coming to mind is like her boobs bounced boobily, I don't know, like stuff like that. Like, it's nothing that horrific, but like, she just feels subtly off. And like, I could ascribe that to like the childhood that gets described in this book, which is very horrific, but I don't know. There's also, the one thing that like really pissed me off is like early in the book, she friend zones someone that she is actually interested in for reasons of superpowers and shady government agencies. But doesn't tell him that part, obviously. And then later in the book, she decides that she actually does want to be in a relationship with him after she's told him all of the everything. And in the first instance, when he kind of, you know, he backs off, he's respectful, he wants to stay friends, she's like, felt really comfortable because she knew that he would never push it once she had said no. But then later in the book, once she's decided that she wants to be in a relationship, he says no because her life is absolutely bonkers. And her, like, last thought of that conversation is like, no, I'm gonna find a way to make him be in a relationship with me. And she, like, drops I love you, like, as a way of being like, you can't break up with me, I love you, which is just really manipulative. So, like, I might want to keep reading just because the last chapter just opened up something that like really blew the story wide open. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know if I want to read another book with that as that kind of personality trait as the main character. So that's where I'm at with The Girl Who Can Move Shit With Her Mind. I've also had this on my bookshelf for like 2 years or something like that. I got it like right after I started my bookstagram and I just never picked it up. But that's that. It's also set in LA, if anyone wants that. And then I'm about to walk to the post office to send off a bunch of books, and I think I'm going to try to finish this one today. This is The Absolute Book. There's some fairies involved so far, and a lot of library talk. The main character wrote a best-selling nonfiction book that talked about like the destruction of libraries, the destruction of books, the destruction of the written word, and the different ways in which that is accomplished. And there's also like this weird moment in her past where someone was possessed and tried to burn down her family library. So I'm very interested to see where it goes. And also it's very thick. So I am here. I need to get to here at least when I'm walking. And then hopefully the rest of it today at some point. So, The Absolute Book, Elizabeth Knox. More to come. Hello, and welcome back to the third part of this video. So, I am in France now. There's another video up on my channel about that and the books that I have with me, but I completely forgot that I had already started doing this video, so I'm gonna have to include a lot of photos of books that I've already returned to the library, even though I read them in the month of October. So, also a bunch of audiobooks. So let me just pull up the story graph so I can tell you about the books that I finished out October reading. So I did end up finishing up The Absolute Book, which I already showed you guys. It wasn't exactly what I wanted from the book, because with the Fae and someone doing like research on libraries and the destruction of libraries, I was like, oh my gosh, this book is going to be it for me. And instead, I just felt kind of like meh about it. There was some good, like I said, the main character is a library scholar. The Fae and their magic mixed with the mundane of like a police procedural is very fun. There are portals and interdimensional conflict. Those are very fun. But like the was like, there's this very confusing mix of religions and history that made for some really jumbled world building. Fairy tale writing, normally I can find really whimsical and fun, but in this case, it just kept me from connecting really with the characters. They felt like characters in a book as opposed to like people that I should be rooting for. And it was just, I think it was too long, because if I'm gonna read over 600 pages of something, like I want to be obsessed with it. I can't be feeling meh about 600 pages. Like that is a little bit too much. So yeah, all told, I felt pretty lukewarm about that one. After that, I listened to the audiobook for A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow, and this is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty. And it's a retelling of Sleeping Beauty that involves other retellings of Sleeping Beauty. So it takes all of the possible ways that this story has been told and kind of just like says, what if all of these are true? So it opens with our main character who is chronically ill and on her way to dying, essentially, because of, I think it was like chemical waste that was handled in an inappropriate way. So there were a bunch of kids who ended up with essentially a ticking time bomb in their cells, and none of them made it past, I think, 21. And she just turned 21. And as a result of like knowing her entire life that she was going to die at a young age, she became obsessed with the Sleeping Beauty stories as a kid, and ended up getting a master's degree in mythology and all of this stuff. And she and her best friend are trying to come up with they're trying to celebrate her birthday together, and she pricks her finger on a spindle and gets sent into another dimension. And that dimension is kind of the more traditional Sleeping Beauty story that I'm more familiar with, at least. So it's really interesting. It was pretty short. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's the start of a series from Alex Hero, and I thoroughly enjoyed the 10,000 Doors of January, and I'm currently reading Once and Future Witches, so I'm just planning to read pretty much everything that they publish. After that, I checked out a couple of things from the library. From my local public library, I checked out The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which, oh my god, I'm so mad at myself for not having read it before now, because I had a picture on my old phone for the longest time, because when I was shelving things at one of my first library jobs, or most of my library jobs, if something caught my attention, I was like, ooh, that sounds interesting, I'd just take a picture of it. So I've been wanting to read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I don't know, 5, 6? How long have I been a librarian? I've been wanting to read this book as long as I've been a librarian. And it's just so incredible. Like, obviously the story is heartbreaking and deals with medical ethics and like the start of medical ethics even, which of course is overshadowed and made worse by the fact that it is white doctors doing what they want with Black patients and not feeling the need to inform the family or anything along those lines. And it's also just like this investigative look into what happened with the HeLa cells, but also this very personal conversation almost between the author and the family and the reader. And I was just bowled over by this book. Oh my goodness. My mom is going to read it next because I left my copy at home. So I'm really excited for her to read it. After that, I checked out a book from the library where I work. So it's a university library. It's specific to like one field of study, but we do have a small fiction collection, usually like made up of things that were donated by staff, students, or partners of students. And I ended up starting to do a inventory because why start small? And I inventoried the entirety of the fiction collection, figured out what I wanted to check out, what I wanted to check out, but that wasn't around anymore. So sadly, a lot of those things have walked off the shelves, and ended up with a couple of Agatha Christie's that I haven't read before. So I read The Murder and the Lynx, which is the second Hercule Poirot book, and I just thoroughly enjoyed those. I think they're kind of goofy, but like, it's Agatha Christie, you know? It's very fun. And this one took place in France. It takes place next to a golf course. There's a case of a couple of missing identities. There's just a lot going on, and it's all handled in a very Agatha Christie kind of way. So that was a very quick, fun read. Next up, I read Crooked House, again by Agatha Christie, and this is one of her standalone novels in that it doesn't follow a specific detective. It also, I think, probably was very ahead of its time when it was first published, in that the person that you least expect ends up being the killer. But I think as a modern reader, I was more able to suspect the killer. Still very fun though. And the last Agatha Christie that I read was Parker Pyne Investigates, which I didn't like as much. So this is a series of short stories put together into one collection, one volume. Parker Pyne is a he spent most of his career dealing with statistics, so he is a statistician. And so he thinks that he has uncovered the road to happiness for any and everyone. So he has an ad in the commercial that says, "Are you happy? If not, consult Parker Pyne." And as a result, these stories deal a lot more with relationships, marriages, love, than a lot of Agatha Christie's other novels. Like, there isn't really necessarily a murder. There are a few, but like not necessarily in all of them. And as a result, there's some really outdated advice that's given as part of the storylines, as if this is just, you know, knowledge that everyone has. So definitely outdated. So that kind of cut into my enjoyment a little bit. But then again, it's an Agatha Christie, so I still had fun reading it. Lastly, of books that I have finished, I have this one in physical form, and that is The Well of Ascension. This is the second book in the Mistborn trilogy. I'm not like the biggest fan of our couple in this, speaking of relationship advice, but like Vin and Elend are really bad at communicating, like really bad at communicating. And like, I'm glad for them, but I wish that there was less of a focus on each character's insecurities and miscommunications as part of this novel, because the other parts of this novel were like building upon what was laid down in book one in really interesting and unexpected ways. We've got new threats, we've got new characters, political finaglings, and the most interesting is when Sazed is trying to figure out this whole hero of ages and like what that means, and is Vin the hero of ages? Did the hero of ages already come? And trying to figure out how something can contradict itself so many times, and that kind of like investigation of the beliefs that have been lost by his people and by most people in the kingdom was just really interesting. Plus there's like a great twist at the end that I thoroughly didn't see coming, and I thought was just like, whoa, really good. So I'm excited for book 3, which I do have with me, so that should be fun. Other things I have started this month or last month, but haven't actually finished. These are more numerous, I think. So let's see. On audiobook, I started listening to The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett, which, holy shit, is already so good. I'm only like 30% into that, and just already in awe of the story and the writing. And like, I'm the last person, I think, to be reading this book because everyone else was smart and read it when it came out. So I'm just very excited to keep reading it and to then check out The Mothers and anything that Brit Bennett publishes going forward. Then I started The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections by Ava Georgic, which is an e-arc, I believe. It is coming out in 2022. And this follows Liesl as she takes over running the special collections of a Canadian university right after they've gotten this, or they've purchased this huge, incredibly expensive, beautiful Bible that is supposed to be a cornerstone of their collection. And Liesl's on vacation when her boss fell into a coma. So she came back, couldn't access the Bible because it was supposed to be locked in his safe, and he had just changed the code to said safe. And so after like a big party where she was supposed to show it off, suddenly it becomes evident that the book is missing or stolen. There's also some weird flashbacks, flash forwards that I don't really know what they have to do with the storyline yet. I'm only, let's see, 20% into the book, so things are still very confused. I'm hoping that they will start making sense soon. Yeah, I don't know, it's very slow. It's very slow, so I'm not sure how much I'm loving it, but it's set in a library and there's a mystery, so I'm gonna keep going. I started reading Dragonbound by Taya Harrison, which is something that I saw recommended on BookTok. It is like, I saw it kind of connected to Sarah J Maas books, and I'm not sure how I feel about it either. So it's an adult fantasy set in New York City for the first part, and in this version of New York City, the elder races, so magical beings, are known, including a dragon, who's like the eldest of the elder races, and let's see, there's elves, there's, I think there's a fairy, and there's Pia, who's our main character. And I think she's half elder, half mortal, and she doesn't seem to really know her powers just yet, but she can get through any locked thing, like nothing locked can keep her out. And she gets blackmailed into stealing from the dragon. And then he's very interested in figuring out who stole from him because he's very like alpha male BS. And then as soon as he finds her, he's not really interested in platonic? Neither is she, to be fair. But yeah, I don't know, just a lot going on there that I'm not super sure about yet, and I'm probably gonna do a whole video about this because I've been just taking pictures of like weird sentences where it's like, hey guys, what? Yeah, this is another one where there's like some writing mistakes that I've been noticing, and then all of those dumb things where it's like, oh, she smelled like something female, or he seemed like whatever male, and I'm like, ugh. That's not the, I don't like that as a way of describing people. So, or elder races, I guess. I also started 2 books that I have in physical form, including If We Were Villains by ML Rio. This is a dark academia book, opens with the main character in prison and the person who arrested him coming in and being like, no, I really need to know what happened. Like, I promise I won't like use it against any of these people. I am retiring, but this has been bugging me since you were put in jail. And then it goes back and we're on this weird campus where everyone that we really interact with is a theater major, and it's a very intense school where you can get kicked out if you don't perform to a certain level of what they're expecting from you. And yeah, I posted about this on Bookstagram and people lost their minds. They seem to really love this book, other readers being they, and I'm excited to keep reading it. And lastly, this month I started reading Perfume, the Story of a Murderer, which based off of that title, I thought it was nonfiction, and I was so confused for the first, like, I don't even know, like probably too many pages. But this is a novel. It is a very wacky novel. It is about a man in 18th century Paris whose name is Jean-Baptiste Grenouille. I don't know why they called him Grenouille. Like, that means frog. Anyways, so he is born as a child with he doesn't give off any scent, but he has a very, very ridiculously strong nose, so he can smell everyone and everything around him. to the point where it like makes him commit a murder at one point because the girl smells too good. It's very strange. Then he also goes and hides in a cave for 7 years because he wants to get away from human smells. And now he's just left someone's court after this weird pseudoscientific interlude, and I think now he's gonna start actually killing like more people as opposed to just one. But it is also good. So I'm just kind of baffled by it, but like 2 of my colleagues stopped me as they saw me carrying it. Were like, ooh, it's one of my favorite books. So I'm also just sitting there like, okay. And the comments on the post that I did the other day are like, people really enjoyed this book and the movie adaptation as well. So I'm gonna keep going. And that is everything that I have read and that I have started reading in the month of October. And I will do another of these in a month for what I read in November. And I will try to keep my hands on the physical books for long enough that I can actually, you know, not that that really changes anything for you guys, but for me, it means that I don't have to go find the photos, save the photos, import the photos into the movie, then you know, editing. Dumb. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, I said this in my previous video about my new apartment in France. If you have any questions about what I'm doing here, how I got here, how it's going, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll do a follow-up video about that soon. So thank you guys and see you soon.